After asking on Facebook for some help with researching alternatives, someone messaged me saying they went to a Sudbury school. Now, it turns out there's quite a few of these Sudbury schools, and they are very, very different to what I remember. There's no testing, no homework, no set times for lessons, no syllabus, and the part which properly made my jaw drop, all the students and staff are part of a democracy where everyone has an equal vote in decisions. In other words, a 5-year-old student has the same power in the school as a staff member. I was like, whoa, I gotta know more about this, so I asked this girl if we could Skype. The first thing I wanted to know was, what's it like? Like, coming from a conventional school, how is that transition?
Usually, if you've been in public schools for a while, it takes you 2 years to figure out that your time is really your own and that you can learn whatever you want. You spend a couple days, weeks doing nothing but reading books and watching TV until there's this moment, we call it bored is good. Whenever you're bored, that's when it really hits you what you want to do. It's all self-directed.
That whole idea just fascinated me. So is literally nothing mandatory?
There are things that are mandatory. You are required to sign in and sign out every day because there are state requirements that you have to be at school for a certain amount of time. And you're required to do a chore each day. And you can choose to opt out of a chore by paying a certain amount of money.
Wait, what? Like real money?
A really nice thing in my mind is that there's a free market. So students can bring in popsicles and sell them to the other students, which is, I use popsicles as an example because that was a very successful business at Circle School for a while. The student would buy those bulk kind of popsicle stick things that you freeze, and he would sell them for 25 cents. And he earned a lot of money at 7 years old. And so before he did that, he had to put the motion into school meeting. So he had to go that week, and then he had to go the next week because all motions receive 2 readings. So that is also learning time management skills, planning skills, paperwork skills.
So in a Sudbury school, this 7-year-old gets experience in applying for permission to do business and being an entrepreneur. If the same 7-year-old tried that at my school, they'd have been given detention and learned that being an entrepreneur gets them punished.
In those 20 minutes, what emerged was you were a very, very big fan of the Sudbury model. Is that fair to say?
It seems freaking cool. I wish I got to go to something like that.
Yeah.
I feel like ever since I left school, the Sudbury model is kind of what I've been following, just naturally, just trying to find things that interest me and follow in that direction. And if I'd started that at age 8, then God knows where I'd be now. Probably way better at producing music.
Well, what was school like for you, if you don't mind going into that for a couple minutes?
I was like the nerdy kid. I was always getting the higher grades and not having the many friends kind of thing. But I had like a kind of epiphany moment in year 9 in England, which is, I don't know what the equivalent grade is in the USA. I was probably like 13, 14, where I was just, I realized that I had no reason to be doing anything that I was doing. I didn't care about it. And so I stopped putting in the effort, and I just kind of coasted from all the effort I'd put in prior to that. And it was around then that I started to take an interest in more creative things, like because I used to hate creativity. I used to hate music. I used to hate everything that wasn't solid academia.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. I used to be, like, as a proper nerdy kid, like into science and business and everything. But yeah, once I had that kind of realization, I started taking an interest in how to make animations, and from there I got into kind of music, because a lot of the animations that I watched had music in them, and started to get into all the angsty teen bands at the time and wanted to make my own angsty teen music.
Right.
So, which I still do. But yeah, it was quite a trapped feeling. Like I felt for those last 3 years of school, particularly, just feeling, why am I stuck here? This is not what I want to be spending my time doing. It's not useful.
It sounds like we had very, very similar experiences. How were your grades and performance in school once you started to feel that way? Mine weren't good.
Oh, mine kind of went just above average, maybe, but it wasn't spectacular at all. Like after I stopped putting in the effort. But yeah.
Yeah, so you feel like if you hadn't had that trap feeling, like if you had been in the Sudbury model the whole time, you would have flourished more. You would have, found more opportunities. Maybe you would have discovered the things that you loved sooner.
Definitely. I'd have probably learned programming or something and been way richer than I am now. I don't know. But yeah, it just seems really sad that people aren't allowed to explore the things that they're really passionate about. Like I in school very often showed a really deep passion for computers, and none of the teachers really picked up on that. And it seems sad to think how many people are sitting there in their maths class showing a really big aptitude for maths, but they aren't being the teachers don't have the time or the freedom to push those kids in a direction that might really enhance their learning in that direction, or like which might happen in a Sudbury school where they see someone taking an interest in something, they might be like, oh, have you seen this or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. It was really cool in the video that you just made. You had questions about Sudbury, so you went and you interviewed a Sudbury student. Then you had more questions about Sudbury, so you found her parents and interviewed them, which I thought was fantastic. And her father had actually been a public school teacher who once
transitioned.
His daughter had this experience in the Sudbury school. He left his public school teaching job, which is, there's a lot of debate about that here in the United States, but once you've been there a while, it's a pretty cushy job. The benefits are good. The pay, relative to a number of hours worked per year is really good. It's, $50, $60 an hour. So that's a big risk, especially when your job is going to have a pension to leave and go and work for a private Sudbury school. So that was really moving for me. But one of the things that he said was, it's not any one person's fault. I think a lot of people, they go through, especially high school, when you get to that age where like adults just aren't really as impressive as they once were. Like, when you're a small little lad and they can drive cars and they can cook food, it's like, well, thank God for you people. But by the time you're like 14, 15 years old, it's like, none of that's impressive anymore. You can do that stuff. So you start to rebel. And I think that whether it's very visible or it's more internal, it's a very, very natural process at that age, even biologically, to like want to leave the nest. So kids start to do that. And what was my point? I'm sorry. I was on a roll with that.
It's passion. It's fun.
The father, right? So as we reach that more rebellious stage, we'd say, oh, that teacher, or that teacher, or this principal. But, the father of that Sudbury girl in your video, he said, it's not a person. It's the system. So all these opportunities are lost, which I think is what you're talking about when you say teachers don't notice these things. How could they? How would they ever have time to notice what one individual student really wants? They might take note of it in passing, but the job just isn't really set up that way. And I think in a lot of respects, they become victims of the system as well. A lot of the teachers that I talk to, they go in very, very passionate, and they really, really feel like it's a job where they're going to make a difference. And you contrast them to the old man who falls asleep at his desk, right? What I started to realize just from, reflecting on my 12 years as a student and then my 12 years working in the system, those two different guys are the same guy. What separates them is time. What separates them is the amount of exposure they've had to what is, for too many people, a really, really frustrating system. It seems like very, very few educators survive that process. And they, like students, are worn down by the system as well. Do you feel like that's true where you are, what you experienced in school?
I've got some friends who are teachers, and there's a YouTuber called CGP Grey, for instance, who's a really cool guy, and I've hung out with him a few times, and we were chatting about this, and he was saying that he just there was no incentive for him to be more creative with his job. The incentive was for him to follow the structure that was already there, because it was like so much easier. If he wanted any time to himself, then it's going to be incredibly difficult. I might be paraphrasing him, so don't quote me exactly on this, but it was this kind of feeling that because he didn't have the ability to be creative, that's going to make anyone hate their job eventually if you're doing the same crap over and over again with no kind of feeling of progress.
Yeah, yeah. And I wonder, we went and we actually toured a Sudbury school for the show, the original Sudbury School, which is in Massachusetts. Maybe 3 years ago, we went and we toured it. And obviously, the adults who are there, different attitude completely. Very energetic, very, very enthusiastic. And I think that having that more hands-off approach where you're not always at odds or you're not always doing this enforcement role really helps people maintain that passion that they have.